Good afternoon. Here is Henriette from MDC for the last tidbit of this week. As you probably all know, we are going every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday at 12 o'clock with a nice piece of knowledge for your lunch. So let's have a toast for today's tidbit. Because today we are talking about something quite serious. What happens if any of your stakeholders or customers, they are in a decline or they are becoming insolvent? How are you going to handle that situation? For that, I have invited Christian Benedictsen-Nislev from DLA Piper in the Tidbit studio. So, Christian, welcome. I will pass over the microphone to you now, and I'm looking forward to getting prepared on what to do in that kind of sad situation that unfortunately some of us will face in this post-COVID-19 period. Stage is yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Henriette, for that, and thank you for letting me join here today and give this Thursday's tidbits. If you could bring up the presentation, please. The title of today's tidbit is Navigating Choppy Seas, Handling Counterparty Decline and Default in Times of Crisis. As you said, perhaps a slightly controversial topic, but a necessary topic to talk about nonetheless, I think. If we move on, just to give a quick introduction here, I think it's fair to say that these topics here have taken up a lot of space at the top of mind of the companies that we work with here in the past 2 months. It's something that's simply very much in the focus, something that people think about all the time. What we'll be talking about here today is firstly counterparties in decline. How do you spot that counterparties are sort of faltering and what to do? And secondly, what happens once they've sort of fallen off the edge, so to say, they're in default. Now, the presentation is focused and geared towards MDC's normal audience, you could say. So carriers, of course, cargo owners, but also suppliers, everyone who's involved in the maritime industry. And as I've probably, as I'll mention now, and as other tidbit speakers have probably said, well, given the relatively short period of time, we'll only just scratch the surface, but hopefully it'll be an interesting little snack for you today. There will be a newsletter produced with the analysis and the points brought up here in this session, and we'll post it on LinkedIn, so feel free to connect if you want to follow and also look at the newsletter when it comes out. So, first impressions from the front line, from the point of view of a law firm advising companies in the maritime industry. What are companies doing to adapt to the changes resulting from COVID-19? First of all, we're seeing an increased focus on management of counterparty risk, which is your normal standard element of risk management. So the risk of a counterparty defaulting, being unable to pay, being unable to fulfill their obligations. So you carry out the normal vetting, perhaps, but we also see companies taking quite drastic measures. Some are taking out credit risk insurance, so the insurance against your customer being unable to pay once payments becomes due. And some companies even saying, well, if we can't get credit risk insurance for you, Mr. Customer, we simply won't sell to you. So that's some of the more serious changes we see right now. But I think what's very admirable for the industry, and also perhaps for companies generally globally now, is there is a feeling of we're all in the same boat. I think there's been a very quick realization across markets that the repercussions of COVID-19, they're hitting all of us. And simply just being aggressive and going out against your counterparty and saying, listen, you have to pay now and be strict, not going to solve the problem. So we see a lot of renegotiation of contracts, extension of payment periods, other things like that. And just a quick comment on that. What's very important there, of course, is you have to be very specific when you renegotiate. You have to document, and you have to be careful about the new terms you enter into. If you extend credit periods, perhaps also try to take some additional risk management measures. Try perhaps to get the right contractual terms in there. Maybe ask for additional security. You can get parent company guarantees. We see that a lot. But generally, just make sure that if you enter into a renegotiation process, have to handle it properly, have to do it right. An email is not enough, to put it bluntly. And then, of course, the dreaded force majeure clause or concept that's also being brought up. I think one of the first things a lot of companies faced just when COVID-19 struck was force majeure notices being sent from counterparties left, right, and center. And I think also here you have to be very careful about whether you accept such an argument when it's brought up by counterparties, and also with your own use of the force majeure event. I mean, the Danish law, for instance, your contract will still be valid, even and binding, even if a force majeure event occurs. But there might be ways under certain circumstances where a counterparty can say, well, I'm not liable if I don't perform that obligation. But it's very limited circumstances where that apply. If there's a force majeure clause, I'm doing this very briefly in sort of in summary, you also have to be very careful with considering if it applies. What's actually affecting supply chains right now is perhaps in some cases the disease itself, but most often it's the government restrictions that's being imposed to combat the spread of the disease. Are those government restrictions covered by your force majeure clause? Do they constitute a force majeure event? So you have to be very careful with that. But that's just the first sort of impressions. What's going on from a legal risk management point of view out there as a result of COVID-19. So if we move on to the first of the two topics that we'll be talking about today, counterparties in decline. Well, how do you find out if one of your counterparties, one of your customers, could be one of your carriers, transporters, could be your warehouse owner that you use, logistics company, and so on, or it could be some of the customers that you're transporting cargo for. Well, you could discover signals in your financial vetting of key customers, key companies, counterparties, if they start renegotiating the terms of their financial situation, loan agreements, and so on. Signals might come out, but otherwise, it's normally what we see here on the screen now: failure to pay when payment becomes due. So if you're in that situation, timing becomes crucial, as I'll also be shown in the slides later on. You have to be very careful with what you do, and you have to act quickly if you want to protect your position. So if you haven't done it already, here's what you might still be able to do, but certainly what you should have done in relation to your counterparties. You need to be very careful with payment terms. Limit the credit periods. Limit the amount of payments that can, for which your counterparty, for which you offer your counterparty credit. Related to that, you have right of retention. This is Danish law terms again, which simply gives you the right as the seller of goods to keep possession of your goods until payment has been made. Obviously, of course, provided you've agreed that payment must take place at the same time as the goods are delivered. So the payment terms here, they're crucial. If you're able to, you should negotiate sort of simultaneously release of goods with payment, or even payment upfront. But as I said, credit period is an often credit that is potentially means potential exposure towards credit risk. I'll get back to liens in a second, but I just want to move on to letter of credit, other means of payment based on objective events. Objective events, I mean issues that are outside of the counterparty's control. Classic example being, if you're selling goods, you might be able to obtain payment once you ship the goods. So if the buyer of the goods have put up a letter of credit for payment, well, then all you have to do is comply with the objective terms of that letter of credit. Could be that you present shipment documents showing that the goods have now been shipped to a given destination. If you provide those goods to the bank will pay you the price. So objective events, objective actions that are within your control, regardless of whether the counterparty wants to pay or wishes to pay at that point in time. That's also, of course, a very good alternative to simultaneous payment from your counterparty. Liens, we'll get back to that. I'm just moving up a bullet point here. Liens might give you rights to also withhold goods or items that belong to your customer until payment has been made. Classic example, the carrier's liens could also be the warehouseman's lien for storage fees and so on. We'll get back to that in the second part. And finally, selling with retention of title. So if you're selling goods, include in your terms that the title to the goods, i.e. the ownership, the property rights in the goods, they stay with you until payment has been made. And we'll get back to that, how that will protect your position in a second. But these are some of the key, very sort of standard ways of protecting your position. Go back to the possession point in relation to liens in the second part here. So what happens then when your counterparties go sort of over the edge, so to say? And for anyone who might be in doubt as to whether that would happen, you only need to look at the recent past. We've got some spectacular insolvencies in Denmark and abroad in the shipping sector. Shipping company Copenship, bunker supplier OW Bunker, and of course Hanjin went insolvent in August, just when everyone had shipped their cargo for the Christmas season, and which I think disrupted a lot of people's transport that year and supply chains. So it happens, it is already happening now in the industry. A lot of insolvencies are taking place, and more might come. Who knows? It's difficult to say, but it's worthwhile preparing yourself for it at least. So let's say you're in an insolvency scenario. The counterparty, customer, whoever else it is, has gone into insolvency. You're informed perhaps by through the media or other sources what to do. Well, there might still be a basis for you to recover more or less in full what you have outstanding from the company that's now insolvent. And we'll take a couple of examples here, looking from different perspectives. But let's just first say the perspectives of the first two bullet points, the seller of goods. So let's say you're selling goods and they're in transit and they're due to be delivered after insolvency occurs. Well, if that's the case, then the insolvency administrator has to return the goods to you. That's clear, at least under Danish law. So that's one point that you can be very certain about. and inform the insolvency administrator of that. Now, for the second point and the third point, let's just go into a little bit more detail about what insolvency actually means. What happens when a company goes insolvent? Well, first of all, the owners lose control of the company. Management are relieved of their duties. The keys are handed to the insolvency administrator, so to say, and he takes over the reins, he or she, and starts operating and running the company. Further, and that's important, the contracts that were binding and entered into with the company before insolvency, they no longer bind the insolvency estate as a general rule of thumb. So that means that the insolvent company or insolvency estate doesn't have to fulfill any of the obligations in contracts entered into by the company before that. So instead, what you have instead as a company is you'll have a claim for breach of contract against that that company, and you can notify that claim to the insolvency administrator. That is the last resort, and we'll get back to why that is. But it's important to just understand this here, that your rights are significantly reduced in an insolvency scenario. However, if you have retention of title, when you sold the goods, you might be able to take back or claw back goods delivered to the insolvency estate. So here we see the importance of retention of title, having that in your standard terms. Our requirements here might differ if your insolvent counterparty is in a different jurisdiction, different country. In Denmark, at least, we have the requirement saying that the goods that you have delivered, they have to still be identified and clearly show that they belong to you, they're delivered by you. So let's say you're a supplier supplying items to a shipyard to be incorporated into a ship under construction. Well, if the items you've delivered, they've already been installed on the ship, it's too late. It won't be possible to identify those items, so you can't enforce your retention of title and claw them back. Of course, you might still have lost something because you've lost the profit, but at least you'll get the goods back, and you can sell them in a different situation, and then recover some of the claim for payment you had against the insolvency estate. So retention of title, an important tool there. Security and other rights. Mortgage, if you're a bank, of course, have a mortgage over a vessel. The vessel owner goes bankrupt, then that's a very good right. You might also be one of the parties who by law are entitled to a maritime lien over a vessel. Classic example is under the laws of some countries, bunker suppliers lien for bunkers supplied to a vessel. Could also, that doesn't apply in Denmark, however, could also be port dues and other dues. So if you're a port, you haven't been paid port dues, and the shipping company goes bankrupt, you still have a very strong right lien that you can enforce against the vessel. The three other bullet points I've mentioned here, the liens, they differ in the rights they give to the lien holder. They differ very much from a maritime lien, so shouldn't be confused with that. But those three types of liens are similar in nature. It basically means if you have items or cargo in your possession, goods, as carrier, as a repairman, as a warehouseman, then you have a right to refuse to deliver those goods to the actual owner of the goods until you've been paid what's due, either for transport, for the repair, for storage. So that's also obviously important rights. And if the insolvency administrator wants the cargo delivered, then you'll have a very strong bargaining position there to ensure that your claim is paid upfront. If you don't have any of those rights, let's just talk quickly about the insolvency process, then I'll sort of try and wrap it up. What you do, well, you notify the administrator of your claim. If you don't have any security, if you don't have any specific priority which we'll talk about in a second, then you should only expect to collect 2 to 5% dividend. So you lose, on average, in a Danish insolvency estate, probably around 95 to 98% of your claim. Because what the administrator will do is he'll list all the claims notified to the estate, and then he will liquidate all the assets in the estate, and then he will start paying out amounts to the creditors in priority. So on average, if you're an unsecured creditor without priority, you should expect to only get 2 to 5%. So you lose most of the claim. Priority, just some examples of that. So you will be paid before other creditors ranking below you if you have a higher ranking claim. Good example of that, if you're an employee with a claim for unpaid salary, you have a relatively high rank, but normal, just trade creditors, you won't have any rank. You will be ranked as unsecured creditors without priority. 2 more points that might be relevant, though, in this sort of slightly gloomy outlook here. First of all, if you owe a debt to the insolvency estate, well, you can set that off against your claim. So instead of just getting 2 to 5% in dividend from your claim, you can say, well, okay, I'll reduce my debt to the insolvency estate by the same amount as I reduce my claim. And in that sense, you'll actually get full value for your claim. So you need to be very focused on any debts you owe to the insolvency estate. Of course, this point here is very complex, and you need to be very careful about using any such right to set up debts. Finally, also, the administrator will set aside past transactions if they've been carried out in breach of insolvency regulation. So let's say, for instance, the insolvency company, the director there has sold an asset to the company at a very high price, so to skim off profits, or if transactions have been made internally in a group of companies, also to skim off profits, to move funds away from the company before it became insolvent. Well, any such transactions might be set aside. And how will that benefit you as a creditor? Well, the insolvency administrator will then receive funds. Funds will be channeled back or paid back to the insolvency estate, and that might boost the dividend that you earn. So if you have any knowledge and any information, any experience with the insolvent company, might be worthwhile engaging with the insolvency administrator and potentially give him information that will assist him in setting aside previous transactions. And anyway, you need to be patient, because it will take time to resolve an insolvency estate. It can take years, and in the meantime, there's little you can do to speed up the process. So that, of course, highlights how it's very preferable if you can use some of the rights that we went through before: security rights, retention of title, and so on. So just to summarize, I know we're sort of running out of time. Key takeaways here to protect your position during this crisis here when counterparty is faltering. Increase your risk management efforts. So monitor, analysis, and implement. Monitor what's going on among your key counterparties. Are they sort of moving closer to the edge of insolvency, and what should you be doing then? Strengthen your contractual position. Ensure that your standard terms are solid, and that's not enough. You also need to have some relatively strict guidelines internally, so when your sales teams are negotiating contracts, they don't come back and say, oh, well, we had these really good and strong clauses, but we weren't really able to negotiate them with the counterparty, so we had to strike them out. I mean, then that doesn't help. You need to ensure that contracts are also negotiated in the best possible manner internally in your organization. Limit credit periods and amounts of credit. Obtain security or other ways of ensuring payment simultaneously with delivery of goods or delivery of your services. Then you need to be aware of the options that are available for you before and after a counterparty's default. We've just talked briefly about some of them here today. And then finally, timing is essential. You need to move quickly because things move very quickly when counterparties start defaulting. All right, thank you very much, Henry. That's it for me.
Let's see. Technical things. Hello. I don't know what's happening. Technical stuff. Yeah, sometimes it doesn't work as you wanted to do. But Christian, it will be a goodbye from here, from the small squares in the corner. Sorry for that.
Sure.
Christian, thank you so much for introducing us to all the scenarios that can occur in these situations. I mean, it's really a lot, and it takes patience and time, as you said. I remember O.V. Bunker. Is that case completed, or is it still running?
There's still a lot of fallout from that
Exactly.
going on. Yeah. Now, well, six years after, right? So
Yeah.
I think you probably get some statistics on the average period of handling and finalizing insolvency estates. But when you're into insolvency estates of that size, that level of complexity, yeah, that's the amount of time it could take. Yeah.
Wow, because when we as people hear from the media what's going on, it's just when it's hot, and then you don't hear about it any longer. But so
Yeah.
is a good case to show how patient you really have to be.
Yeah, that's very true. But I think it also highlights that, if you can at all, just spend a little bit of time on maybe analyzing your position, maybe identifying a couple of key counterparties that you might be concerned about, and then trying to spend a little bit more focus on thinking about, is there anything we can do? Because you have a wide range of options. You really do. Yeah.
And I'm glad to hear that the employees, they have the first pick
Yes.
if these kind of things occurs.
Mm.
So, Christian, it has nearly come to an end with the tidbit of today. As it was a little bit longer than the usual 17 to 17 minutes that we do for tidbits, it's okay because there were no questions. So nobody wanted to ask questions for this tidbit, but I'm sure we got the knowledge, and this tidbit has, of course, been broadcasted, and it will be available for listening along, sharing with your colleagues, with your network, if you think some should have this knowledge too. Next week, we will have a couple of tidbits as well. It will be about scrubbers. If you're still wondering what is this scrubbers actually all about, you'll have the opportunity on Thursday to get to know that, and also to get to know what is the payback time on scrubbers now where the oil price is so low, and a lot of other nice small tidbits for that. And then a tidbit for everyone is on Wednesday, where we will have Thomas Heckman, who is actually my colleague, but he used to be a consultant and also a broker for Hafnia Tankers. And he will talk about the value of networking, and he will indeed teach all of you how to get people saying yes. So listen along on that. My colleague, she just wrote the link if you want to sign up for invitations to other tidbits. So that was everything for today. Thank you for listening along to all of you, and thank you, Christian, for sharing your lunch with us.
Sure. Thanks.
Bye. Have a nice day.
Take care.
Jeg ved det godt. Prøv lige at se her, hvad den gør. Jamen, det har jeg gjort. Du kan se her, jeg kan ikke. Jeg havde jo trykket stop. Men jeg kan ikke, jeg kan ikke gøre noget. Hvad vil du sige, hvis jeg bare lukker fanen ned? Hvad vil du tænke? Hvad tænker du? Kan du prøve at logge ind som admin? Prøv at se, om du kan smide mig af, og så se, om du kan gøre det. Bare bliv på her. Det var det, jeg sagde. Jeg kunne se, der var sket et eller andet.